Everyone, welcome to Moment of Clarity live. It's always live. I don't know. I don't know why I said that, but thanks for being here. Please take a second to share this. Let everyone know. I'm going to get into how the U.S. has just annexed Germany. We finally did it. Finally annexed Germany economically. Yeah, maybe there's a little caveat here. It's more of an economic annexation. We're gonna get deep into that because that's what's going on right now. It has a lot to do with Ukraine, has a lot to do with the proxy war, has a lot to do with the fact that the world is splitting economically into two warring factions. Yeah, a lot of detail coming up on that on those fronts. Also going to get into someone just declared they're running for president. Can't recall the name. Donald Glover? Was it? I think it's Donald Glover announced running for president. I'm going to talk for a minute on that. I'm not going to do like a CNN talk for 45 minutes about Donald Glover running for president, but yeah, gotta talk about that. Gonna talk about how the Supreme Court is prepping, is getting ready, is gearing up, is double fisting the gearbox, an expression I just made up just now. Two, they're gearing up to destroy what remains of Native American sovereignty, Native nation sovereignty. Yeah, gonna and more and more. I'll just leave it at and more. There are other stories. There is more of the and more. But all right, so let's do it, shall we? Let's just get into it. And please, I love the comments. Please, everybody, throw in your comments, your thoughts. Do you think the U.S. is annexing Germany economically? And after I've gone through the details here, let me know if your opinion has changed from right now to future you. You can send a note, leave a message, send an email to future you, and get into a debate with them. All right, so here we go. This is an article from Michael Hudson, an economist who's been doing great work. I feel like he's really gotten into the zeitgeist during the proxy war in Ukraine. People are really starting to see and hear from him more. But all right, so, and this has been reposted by popularresistance.org, great outlet. Germany's position in America's new world order. And by the way, before I even get, and he never uses the word annexing, I use that word, but I would like to read the dictionary definition of annex. One is to add territory to one's own territory by appropriation. Now, if you were to say economically annex, then to add economic territory to one's own territory is actually what we're doing. I will get into the details in a second. But the first definition is to add as an extra or subordinate part. So to add Germany as a subordinate part to the U.S. empire economically, I think it'd be tough to deny that that's what's going on right now. But all right, so Michael Hudson, he wrote a lengthy article on this, and I'm just going to go through some small portions of it. But Germany and other NATO countries have been told to impose trade and investment sanctions. You all knew that, which is really economic war, but we'll call them sanctions. We'll use the polite term because we're in polite company. Trade and investment sanctions upon themselves that will outlast today's proxy war in Ukraine. Now, did you catch the way he phrased that? Germany and other NATO countries have imposed sanctions on themselves. They've imposed economic war on themselves at the behest of the United States. The United States said, cut off your biggest energy partner. Energy is a euphemism meaning planetary death fluid, but whatever, we can talk about that another time. We cut off your biggest oil source, cut off one of your biggest trading partners, just cut all that off and buy far more expensive products and energy from around the world, and it'll kill you economically. And Germany and these other countries said, okay, sure will, mate. I don't know why I got a German guy saying mate, but he did. He just did it. It was his fault, honestly. I don't know what his problem is. U.S. President Biden and his State Department spokesman have explained that Ukraine is just the opening arena in a much broader dynamic that is splitting the world into two opposing sets of economic alliances. I've gone into this before on previous live streams. This is the great splitting of the world's economies that we're seeing right now, that we're witnessing in real time. And that sounds like, okay, that could be okay, right? Splitting of the world's economies. But there's two things you got to know. One, it puts us on a path of nuclear Armageddon. So that's a bad thing in general. Another is that it is completely antithetical to countries working together to solve the world's problems. It is the opposite of that. It is going at each other economically, economic war, rather than working together to deal with our problems, which means, and we'll address this more in a moment, that we're basically throwing any thought of dealing with the climate crisis out the window. Just done with it. Because you can't have an economic war around half the world and expect to be partnering in dealing with the climate crisis. Anyway, like I said, we'll come back to that. The global fracture promises to be a 10 or 20 year struggle. A 10 or 20 year struggle. That's what we're getting ready for. That's what we're double fisting the muchachos. That's not what the expression was. I don't remember what it was. Double fisting the gearbox. What was it? I can't remember. I made it up and now I've already lost it. But you can use either of those. Double fisting the muchachos sounds much worse. That's a rough evening. For some, for others, maybe that's a great evening. I don't know. But in all seriousness, folks, I think a lot of people, if you watch CNN and stuff like that, you think that this Ukraine proxy war is horrific, but it'll be over in a few months, a year, and they're going to come to some kind of agreement to stop, hopefully, the missiles from falling fairly soon in the next year. I fucking hope. But the economic war, the economic rift, this new Cold War against Russia and China, this great power conflict bullshit that the U.S. is at the forefront of, that is not going away soon, and it's only going to get worse. And we're going to view the 2010s as the good times. Okay, so 10 to 20 year struggle to determine. 10 to 20 year struggle to determine whether the world economy will be unipolar, U.S.-centered, dollarized economy. I talk a lot about the petrodollar. It's where the U.S. gets our power, a lot of it, and we cannot live without it. We cannot spend endlessly without petroleum being sold and bought in dollars, and petroleum being sold and bought a lot. So we have no interest in stopping the usage of petroleum, oil, fossil fuels. We have no interest in doing fuck all about the climate crisis. We have every motivation to do the opposite, whatever the opposite of doing fuck all is. Unfuck nothing. We are doing that. We are unfucking nothing, which is true. To determine whether the world economy will be unipolar, U.S. centralized dollarized economy, or a multipolar, multi-currency world centered on the Eurasian heartland with mixed public-private economies. And in the last episode of my live stream, I showed the chart showing the power of the dollar, the power of the euro, and the power of the pound versus the ruble. And they've all gone down while the ruble has gone up. So we're basically, our leaders are so fucking dumb that we're basically hastening and making worse the transition away from the U.S. empire. So I suppose in that way, for those of you who understand, and I hope it's most of you, that the U.S. empire must at minimum dwindle, but really become a non-thing. To use the philosophical technical term, a non-thing, in order for humanity to continue to exist. Because as long as you have a U.S. empire, you have infinite war, you have eventual nuclear Armageddon. You cannot be in infinite war with nuclear powers and expect them to just always not have some catastrophe happen. And then also destruction of humanity through climate crisis. So if you want either of those end times to not happen, then you should want a dwindling, to use the most polite, lowest level or least emphatic term, dwindling of the U.S. empire. You should cheer that on. You should celebrate that. But anyway, I am not celebrating this format of it because I don't like to see Ukrainians used as cannon fodder. See, all of those people who tell you that they support Ukraine by supporting the U.S. stance of endless war in Ukraine, they're actually saying, I support Ukraine and I want as many Ukrainians to die. And you need to understand that and really grasp that. If you really support Ukrainians, if you really don't want them to die, you should want all of this to happen at a peace table. And I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how long you got to lock Putin, Zelensky, and whatever 4,500 advisors they have all in one room with, you turn the heat up a little each hour and you give them water that tastes like a little funky, like a little metallic-y, so they don't really want to drink it. And then you give them no deodorant whatsoever, and you lock them in there, and the stink and the BO just fucking making the wallpaper curl off, and eventually they'll come to a goddamn solution. And that's what you do. That's how you end this. It all comes down to deodorant or lack thereof and thermostat. And those two things in a single room, you'd have the answer. I bet you they wouldn't last 12 hours. Big, beefy Russians and Ukrainians with no deodorant, fucking 95-degree room. Come on. They'd solve this. All right. Most political theory assumes that nations will act in their own self-interest. Now, that's if you want to understand the United States and how we act, just assume we're always acting 100% in our self-interest, but our self-interest is not the self-interest of you or me, average Americans. It's the self-interest of the ruling class, of the richest Americans. So any move the United States makes, go, how does this help the richest Americans? And that will be your answer. Then you will know why we did what we did every single time. So that's what he's saying, is that generally countries act in their self-interest, but not in this case, not in the case with Germany. Otherwise, so he says most political theory assumes nations will act in their self-interest. Otherwise, they are satellite countries, right? Not in control of their own fate. If they're not acting in their self-interest, and they're doing what others want them to do, then they're, satellite is kind of a nice term for it, more, a servile country, I guess. Germany is subordinating its industry and living standards to the dictates of U.S. diplomacy and the self-interest of America's oil and gas sector. It is doing this voluntarily, not because of military force, but out of an ideological belief that the world economy should be run by U.S. Cold War planners. An ideological belief that the U.S. and NATO countries should run things, and if any other countries like Russia stand up to that, or Iraq or Libya, for instance, then they should be crushed and put back in their place, or turned into a failed state, as we did in Libya. And how much concern have you seen from the United States or NATO countries for completely destroying Libya? You see a lot of concern? You see them walking around with little Libyan flag pins on their collar? Do you see a lot of I'm sorry's, little Hallmark cards they send to Libyans? Do you see a lot of Libyan flag colors on their Facebook thumbnails of like Tony Blinken and Joe Biden and shit? No, I haven't seen much of that, because they don't give a shit about their victims. Not for a second. So anytime they tell you to care about someone, hey, folks, let's get together and care about Ukrainians. If it's coming from them, it's bullshit. Hey, let's get together. We need to care about Afghan women by having an economic war on Afghanistan, thereby killing more people in Afghanistan under our economic war than we were killing with our bombs last year. That's their version of caring, right? You've seen all this stuff, right, over the past year about caring about Afghan women. And back a year ago when we first pulled out the remainder of our troops, it was all about, oh, we got to care for Afghan women. And apparently that care manifests itself in the form of an economic war on Afghanistan, which has killed far more people than our bombs did last year, at least. Maybe not during the height of the bombing, but last year. So they're better off having whatever the final number was, 9,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan, than the economic war that's killing all these people. Now, call me crazy. I think actually we should do neither. I think we should have 0 troops in Afghanistan, and I think we should have not have economic war on them either. That would probably help the women the most, right? All right, so it says U.S. is doing this. Germany is doing this voluntarily. He then goes into a deep historical perspective, which you all are welcome to read this. You can read it at popularresistance.org. You can Google Michael Hudson. But I'm going to skip the historical perspective and move on. How do we explain why the seemingly logical potential of mutual gain between Western Europe and the former Soviet economies turned into a sponsorship of oligarchic kleptocracies? Kleptocracy is ruled by thieves, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term. So the U.S. has a kleptocracy, the Ukraine has a kleptocracy, Russia has a kleptocracy, Britain has a kleptocracy. Most of them are kleptocracies. The Nord Stream pipeline's destruction capsulizes the dynamics in a nutshell. For almost a decade, a constant U.S. demand has been for Germany to reject its alliance on Russian energy. So a lot of people, because we were only told by our mainstream media, we don't care about anything till we're told to care about it, because we only recently, in the past year, were told to care about Ukraine and Russia. The dynamic between Russia and Germany. We're told to care about Russia years ago, but Russia and Germany, a lot of people were not paying attention to the fact that the U.S. has been trying to get Germany to not go in to this deal with Russia on the oil pipelines to get more and more Russian energy, Russia, and Germany was going forward anyway because economy to have affordable, by their standards, affordable oil. Okay, so much more valuable. So I'm hoping this live stream is still going. I noticed that my Wi-Fi is fucking up, but if I cut off, then put a comment saying that I've cut out. Someone already has, but then again, the comment might not come through. So what the fuck would I know? So how do we explain why a seemingly logical potential of mutual gain has turned into kleptocracies? The U.S. has demanded for a decade that Germany cut off their reliance on Russian energy. These demands were opposed by, Gerhard Schroeder and Angela Merkel and German business leaders. They pointed to the obvious economic logic of mutual trade of German manufacturers for Russian raw materials. The U.S. problem was how to stop Germany from approving the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So the U.S. is sitting there trying to figure out, how do we stop Germany from approving the Nord Stream 2? And why does the U.S. want this? Well, one is we want to sell our oil to them, and we don't want them getting it elsewhere. But on top of that, we want to keep Europe in a vassal state system, in a feudal system, as servile to us. And Europe was moving out of that. They've long been that, but they were moving out of that. They were growing. They were aligning more with Russia and China. China has their what's it called? Belt and Road Initiative, that where they were making inroads to being the top trading partner. Oh my God, now would be the perfect time to show you that chart. Do I have it? Yes. Yes, I think I do. All right. Now we're talking. Because I had this chart ready. This is why the US is freaking out. One of the main reasons that is also never talked about on your mainstream media. Where is it? There we go. This is top trading partners in 2000. You see the year up in the upper left, 2000 versus 2020. So if they're top in the first map, in both maps, top trading partner is the US, is blue. And top trading partner is China, is red. Look at the difference between 2000 and 2020. The entire world, essentially, has shifted to China being their top trading partner. So economically, the U.S. is getting ostracized, basically. And in 2020, you see that even a lot of Europe, it's kind of tough to see, but even a lot of Europe China's become their top trading partner. Africa completely, South America almost completely. And so the U.S., rather than realize, hey, maybe the U.S. empire needs to back off a little and needs to not have 900 military bases around the world and needs to stop obliterating countries, killing millions. The estimates are, and I think it's actually a low estimate, that we've killed 6 million people with our war on terror over the past 20 years. All of this is connected to stopping this, what you're seeing in this chart, to going back to owning the world economically, to having hegemony. And it seems to be largely backfiring, but this map says a lot. And how often will your mainstream media show you this map? This map is really, honestly, a lot of why we're seeing what we're seeing. Okay, so to go back to the Michael Hudson article. So they're trying to stop, the U.S. is trying to stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, right? Pipeline directly from Russia to Germany. So it makes it incredibly cheap to ship oil, obviously. Victoria Nuland, who notoriously helped create the 2014 coup in Ukraine, President Biden and other U.S. diplomats demonstrated that the way to do that was to incite a hatred of Russia. The new Cold War was framed as a new crusade. That was how George W. Bush had described America's attack on Iraq to seize its oil wells. Well, yeah. It's funny that Michael Hudson put that in there, the phrase to seize its oil wells, because there were larger reasons than that. Had to do with making sure Iraq didn't leave the petrodollar, because we didn't actually seize that much of the oil. But anyway, the U.S. sponsored 2014 coup created a puppet Ukrainian regime that spent 8 years bombing of the Russian-speaking eastern provinces. You guys have hopefully heard me or others go on and on about that. The war in Ukraine did not start in February. It actually started in 2014 when mostly Nazis, but not all Nazis, began bombing and killing culturally Russian people in the Donbass region in Ukraine. So it's been going on for 8 years, killed 1,500 or 15,000. I think it might be 1,500 people. NATO thus incited a Russian military response. The incitement was successful, and the desired Russian response was duly labeled an unprovoked atrocity. Its protection of civilians was depicted in the NATO-sponsored media as being so offensive as to deserve the trade and investment sanctions that have been imposed since February. That is what a crusade means. And there's definitely an argument to be made. There's definitely an argument to be made that that Russia started this initially to protect Russian civilians. However, I am not, as my conversation last week with Chris Hedges, as he said, you're going to kill a lot of innocent civilians in any war, which is why I'm opposed to all war. It's just complete destruction. Okay, well, several of you are saying that it's 14 or 15,000 and not 1,500. So yeah, I wasn't. I couldn't remember how many zeros were on the end. So the result is that the world is splitting into two camps: the U.S.-centered NATO and the emerging Eurasian coalition. One byproduct of this dynamic has been to leave Germany unable to pursue the economic policy of mutually advantageous trade and investment relations with Russia and also China. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is going to China this week to demand that it dismantle its public sector and stop subsidizing its economy. I mean, I love that. Germany's like, just stop subsidizing anything in your country. Just fucking don't do that. Or else Germany and Europe will impose sanctions on trade with China. There is no way that China could meet this ridiculous demand any more than the U.S. or any other industrial economy would stop subsidizing their own computer chip and other key sectors. The German Council on Foreign Relations is a neoliberal, quote-unquote, libertarian arm of NATO, demanding German deindustrialization and dependency on the U.S. for its trade, excluding China and Russia and their allies. This promises to be the final nail in Germany's economic coffin. And I'm sorry to read so much, but I felt like this was so important that it necessitated me reading a bunch of that word for word. And like he's saying, this is the nail in the coffin for Germany. People in Germany over the next 10 years are going to be struggling immensely. I mean, they're talking about people having to cut off heat during the wintertime. It's going to turn a lot of Europe into, these are third world is old terms, but into just a not very developed country, like a really struggling populace. We need better terminology for some of this shit. But the fact that they're doing that to themselves so that the U.S. can maintain hegemony, can maintain ownership of the world, is truly amazing and incredible and sad to see. But this is a, I've been saying for years, the past 5 years or so, that the U.S. is losing their empire, our empire. We're in late stage capitalism. It's the environment is collapsing around us, and the U.S. is like a cornered tiger. And we're not gonna when you have an empire that's as sociopathic as America, willing to kill 6 million people over the past 20 years, so that we can maintain dollar hegemony. That cornered tiger is not going to behave well. They're not. These sociopaths at the top of our society are not going to sit there and go, "Oh, I guess we should shrink a little. I guess we should back off." Much as the way the British Empire dwindled, there were endless wars that the British Empire was involved in to try and keep their empire. The difference is that the military weaponry back then, 200 years ago, and before, was small enough that Britain could only cause a few, million, maybe even a few 100,000 deaths in their freak out, in their we're losing our empire freak out. Where, they probably caused more with, starvation and things. But whereas the U.S. in we're losing our empire freak out can cause millions and millions of deaths. But yes, the Germany is being annexed by the U.S. right now economically, and Germany is kind of the leader of the EU. So this is a big deal. Another byproduct of America's new Cold War has been to end any international plan to stem global warming. I told you we'd come back to that. It's about the U.S. ability to harm other countries by disrupting their access to energy and other basic needs. But yeah, any concept or idea or plan of doing anything about the climate crisis is just going up in smoke. I mean, there was very little to begin with, but there's fucking none right now. The entirety of the U.S. governmental structure right now does not give a fuck about climate crisis. They might give a little bit of a fuck about how it impacts the U.S. militarily, but there is no discussion. Instead, it's just about how to keep the petrodollar strong, how to alienate and ostracize Russia and China, how to make slow China's growth economically. Like, that is all the discussion is. And they don't give a fuck about Americans. They don't care if Americans are struggling. They don't care that 1 out of every 3 Americans either says they're either severely struggling or doesn't know where like next month's rent will come from. He continues, that is the context for today's fight in Ukraine, which is to be merely the first step in the anticipated 20-year fight by the U.S. to prevent the world from becoming multipolar. This process will lock Germany and Europe into dependence on the U.S. supplies of LNG. And where do U.S. supplies of LNG come from? Fucking fracking. A lot of fracking, all right? And that's something else that you need to understand here is the discussions about how harmful fracking is to the environment, the discussions about how it's turning people's water flammable, the discussions about the amount of fresh water that goes into fracking, destroys whole areas, all of that has ceased. Now it is purely about how much can we frack so that we can deliver all this LNG, which is a fun, light term for liquefied natural gas. There's no such thing as natural gas. It's just fucking death fluid. That's all it is. So they, So yeah, the dependence on the U.S., dependence on U.S. quote unquote energy, and this also gets to the U.S. has to frack endlessly to get all of this, to have all of this oil, to have all this LNG, and in order to do that, what do they want to frack under next? Native American lands and national parks, but also Native American lands. Which remember that fact because we're coming back to that in a story coming up in a moment. So he continues. I'm almost done here with this article, by the way. The trick is to try and, he continues, the trick is to try and convince Germany that it is dependent on the U.S. for its military security. What Germany really needs protection from is the U.S. war against China and Russia that is marginalizing and Ukrainizing Europe. There have been no calls by Western governments for a negotiated end to the war. I mean, think about that. Think about that. If you need to know, if you know nothing else about what's going on in Ukraine, you don't understand it, you don't understand the U.S. involvement, you don't understand any of that, all you have to know is just one thing, and it should tell you a lot. There have been zero calls from I think all of the NATO nations, and especially the U.S. and UK, for a negotiated peace. Zero from those nations for peace. If these people gave a shit about Ukrainians, do you not think there'd be a few calls for peace? A few calls for let's stop this insanity? No. There's been none. The United States does not declare war anywhere. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I skipped a line. There have been no war has been declared in Ukraine. The United States does not declare war anywhere. We just endlessly bomb. We don't declare war. Because declaring war would require a congressional declaration under the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. and NATO armies bomb, organize color revolutions, meddle in domestic politics, and impose the sanctions that are tearing Germany and its European neighbors apart. How can negotiations end a war that either has no declaration of war or is a long-term strategy of total unipolar world domination? The answer is that no ending can come until an alternative to the present US-centered set of international institutions is replaced. That requires the creation of new institutions reflecting an alternative to the neoliberal, bank-centered view that economies should be privatized with central planning by financial centers. Pretty incredible article there, showing how the US has annexed Germany economically, completely bending them to our will and getting Germany to go completely against their own self-interest. And Germany, along with other countries, but Germany is the most powerful economically and is largely the leader of the EU, and France as well. And as the Ukraine proxy war was being used initially in that first month to cut off the partnership between France and Germany and Russia, France and Germany did try and fight against it initially. They initially said, let's have peace, let's stop this, all those things. But the US and UK made sure that no peace would happen. Many of you may have seen the live stream I did where I covered the revelations that there actually was a peace deal between Ukraine and Putin that was about to be signed, that was very close to being signed in April. So like within a month of this shit popping off, they had a peace deal that was about to be signed. But UK, Boris Johnson, as a representative of the United States, went to Ukraine and told Zelensky that to cut off all peace talks, and that even if he signed something, the US and UK and NATO would back out of their support of Ukraine, basically leaving Ukraine alone to try and deal with Russia. And so Zelensky ended those peace deals. So the US and UK have made sure there is no peace because they want to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. All right. I hope you got a lot out of that. I got a lot out of that article from Michael Hudson. Much of it I and many of you may have already known, but even so, even with the stuff you already knew, it helps to see it crystallized, put into a well-explained format like that. All right. And still, I'm going to do one other story first, but still remember what I said about now we need to start drilling in native lands to supply all this LNG, sorry. But because I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But before we get to that, let's get to the most important story of our lives. Donald Trump has announced he's running for a third time for president. And don't worry, I'm not going to spend hours on this. It'll be short, but I felt like I should at least address it. There's a few things going on here. I'm not gonna say all the things that you get from mainstream media because you don't need that. You don't like. If you want to hear how Trump's a con man and a goon and a fucking serial rapist and all of those things, you can turn on CNN and it's all true. All that stuff is true. He is a con man. He does have assault charges against him, some rape charges by over 20 women. As does Biden. Biden's not in the 20s. Biden's only got, I believe, four accusers. But you're choosing between. That was a fun election last time. You're choosing between two rapists. But I'm going to get to the stuff that, even though it does talk, even though I am going to talk about how horrible Trump is for a second, it's the stuff the mainstream media largely doesn't want to reveal to you, either because they're not smart enough, but that's not really the reason. The reason is because it reveals the U.S. system too much. What's going on right now, and I've said this before, is that Trump was not a good representative. He was not a good CEO for America, Inc. They don't care all the things they pretend to care about, like your ruling class that is against Trump. They say they care about his racism. They care about him stealing documents from the White House. They care about him how he behaved with North Korea and stuff like that. They largely don't care about any of that. Climate change. They largely don't care. They did want to make sure he didn't have peace with North Korea. That's actually true, but they largely didn't. They don't care about any of those things. The real reason is that is some of his foreign policy, the fact that he wasn't belligerent, wasn't warlike enough with certain countries like North Korea, like Russia. And by the way, he did in his speech, he acted more friendly with Russia. However, in the actions of the U.S. government, there were actually more sanctions placed on Russia under Trump than under Obama. So the idea that things were just easy by the U.S. empire went easy on Russia under Trump is not true. It's another false CNN talking point. But all the things that they tell you that they care about, and again, I think it's pretty obvious here, but I'm talking about most of the mainstream media. CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC, BBC, Guardian, CBC, all that mainstream media, NPR, PBS. Now, there is obviously, I'd say, another third of the media that was pro-Trump for a long time. Fox News, whatever those other ones are, Newsmax or something, that were pro-Trump. Mainly, I'm addressing the liberal two-thirds of our media. The things they tell you they hate about Trump are not what the system actually hates about Trump. The reason the system had to purge themselves of Trump, had to push him clear of the ruling class system, was merely because he was revealing the American empire for what it was. He revealed the American empire as a con man, as a billionaire, literally with fake skin painted on, fake hair. Just everything about him it represents the American empire in a way that is not, in order for them to keep the American empire going, it's got to be filled with lies. It's got to be all lies. They can't come out there and be painted orange and say, we don't care about little people. We don't care about shithole countries. Like he actually told the truth to the American empire, which was very bad as a CEO of America Inc. And he did it because of his ego, and he's an idiot. And in certain ways, he's actually a very smart con man in many ways. But trillions of dollars were funneled to the richest Americans under Trump. So that's not why they dislike him. Trillions of dollars, like the largest corporate tax break that has ever happened under Trump. So this ruling class, many of them, not all of them, there are some billionaires that definitely support Trump, but many of them needed to find a way to get him out of the way so that they could have a better face to the American empire. And, they put in Joe Biden. They are far more scared of someone like Bernie Sanders, who I have a lot of criticisms of, but still, they're far more scared of someone that might give everybody health care and things like that. But most of the ruling class is not supporting Donald Trump because of those reasons. So they needed a way to get him out. And now he would, if he had a legit election against Joe Biden, he would win easily. But they're doing everything they can to try and stop him from running, to try and stop him from being the face of America Incorporated. And they're doing it through lawsuits and things like that. And to some degree, it's succeeding. The deplatforming, the censoring is succeeding to some degree. Maybe just as they said, his candidates did not fare very well in the midterms. And, there's a variety of reasons. One is because they've deplatformed him. Another one is because because the Democrats for 40 years failed to codify Roe v. Wade. So now Roe v. Wade's been overturned. So people came out to vote. Abortion was one of the top issues, people said. And so they came out, many of them, to vote for Democrats. Not all of them. Democrats still lost the House, so not all of them. But The reason Republicans did worse than normal was because of Roe v. Wade, and that Roe v. Wade wasn't codified. A woman's right to choose wasn't codified over all these years because the Democrats didn't want it codified. They didn't want to actually defend women and defend your right to your body. So, but it helped them in the election. Anyway, to long story short, here is my prediction. We will hear, 2 straight years of a lot of Trump coverage. I think our mainstream media will not cover him as much as they did the first time around. They gave him something like, was it? I used to know these numbers by heart, but it was like he got 10 times as much coverage as Hillary Clinton and over 20 times as much coverage as Bernie Sanders in the mainstream media. Now, I am no Hillary supporter, but I'm just saying I said in the lead up, this is before we knew whether Bernie would win the primary or anything. I said, if Donald Trump wins this thing, it will be because of the mainstream media, because they are covering him endlessly. Whether they're covering him through hate, whether it's hate fucking or not, whether they're covering him through hate or not, they're covering him endlessly. And so by doing that, you are telling everybody about Donald Trump day in and day out. And everybody's searching for news about Donald Trump. And all they care about is Donald Trump. And they're thinking about Donald Trump. I mean, Kanye West, a lot of these people now have realized that it's better to be talked about because you're hated than not talked about. And so your mainstream media covered him endlessly, especially in the first election, but in the second as well, because he was president. I mean, you can't not cover the president. And I think they're going to decrease that. They've deplatformed him in many ways. And so here's my prediction. I'm going on too long about this, but here's my prediction. Because of those reasons, Donald Trump will lose the primary to someone like DeSantis, which quietly behind closed doors, the entire ruling class will get behind. Because they know Biden's a disaster. They know Biden can't string a sentence together. So DeSantis or one of these very capable fascists will win and then will win the next election. You will have a Republican president, but it likely will not be Donald Trump. I don't know if they'll put Donald Trump in jail. I think that's highly unlikely because if you lock up a former president, then it opens the door to locking up a lot of presidents. And I don't think they want that. So I don't think he'll end up in prison, but I think they'll find some way to stop him. DeSantis or one of these people that is a far more silky smooth, far more refined fascist will take over. And those of you who follow my stuff, this is not positive speak about Joe Biden. Joe Biden is in terms of actual doing, in terms of actual policy, equally bad. But I think that and the ruling class will be fine with that because they want, they don't like, they ended up with Joe Biden, who they didn't really like, but they wanted to get Trump out of there. They hated Trump. And so much of the ruling class wants just a really sophisticated, good bureaucrat, fascist shithead to be in the presidency. But as we know, much of the presidency doesn't even matter. I mean, hopefully you've followed my stuff on that. Much of these decisions are made by the largest corporate entities in the world. Earlier today, I talked with Stephen Donziger. If you didn't see that interview, I hope you will watch it. It's at Mint Press's YouTube page, which is youtube.com/user/Mint Press News. I don't know why that is. Because if you just type in /Mint Press News, it goes to something else. So type in youtube.com/user/Mint Press News, MINT. Anyway, that's my prediction for what's coming up, and I'm going to try and talk about it as little as possible. Oh, I was just saying, oh God, I forgot to finish my statement that we live as I was talking with Stephen Donziger about, we live in an inverted totalitarian system ruled by the anonymous corporate state. And so a lot of these decisions are not made by the president. These decisions are made by BlackRock and Vanguard and Big Ag and Big Oil and Big Pharma. And so yet another reason we spend way too much time talking about these presidential issues. All right, the rest of this live stream, which I have at least 2 stories, maybe more to coming up. I am not done yet. I'm not dead yet. The rest of this live stream will be at rumble.com/Lee Camp. If you're watching there right now, it'll continue as is. It's free to watch there. There's no paywall. Just go over rumble.com/Lee Camp. I hope you will join me there right now and continue the fun. If you're not, if you refuse to join me there, I hope you will become a member at leecamp.net. That is the only way I'm able to support my work and keep all of this going. So join me at rumble.com/Lee Camp for free and become a member at leecamp.net, because I want to give you that story about how we are getting ready to crush indigenous rights. Well, the Supreme Court is. All right. Just give me 1 second to bloopity bloop. Bloopity bloop dot bloop. And for those of you who I was